that we have meetings of this character, not just to put forward our ideas, but to have a dialogue, to have a discussion with the more politically conscious sections of the working class, and yes, to welcome questions like have been raised here today, and contrary points of view, oppositional points of view, because we think in a clash of ideas, conducted in a friendly and a comradely fashion, not distorting the position that's put forward of people who disagree with you in the course of the discussion, but by examining ideas seriously, as the overwhelming majority of the contributors to this meeting tonight have done. In that way, we raise the level of understanding, what Marxists call the consciousness of the most developed sections of the working class, and in so doing, that will have an effect, in turn, on the ideas and the discussions that they will take back to other workers and help to clarify issues and the way forward for the working class movement. That is the tradition of the Socialist Party, and that is the tradition of the Committee for the Workers' International. And I think that the points that were raised in the discussion tonight from a number of comrades about the health service, from Ruth, from Fiona and so on, really does show the character of the situation that is developing in Ireland. There was one comment made that we don't have MRSA in Germany and in France. That's true. But if Merkel and if Sarkozy get their way of going down the British road, of going down the road of Thatcher, continued by Blair, and now going further with Brown, then as sure as night follows day, the conditions that we see in Britain and Ireland of hospitals, rather than being a means of curing and helping to make people more healthy, it will have exactly the opposite situation. And the reason for this situation, it's a product of this phase of neoliberal capitalism, of course the privatisation that has taken place, especially in cleaning in the health service in Britain, has created the dirty conditions, frankly, under which these particular illnesses and these particular viruses grow. It is also, we have to remember today, in this discussion tonight, that if you look around the world, irrespective of how much is spent on the health service, if it's in the private sector, in general, it does not deliver the goods as far as the vast majority of people are concerned. For instance, in America, has a higher percentage at the present time of the GDP that's spent on the health service, and yet the health service in the US is catastrophic, particularly so at this stage in a period of crisis. And why is that so? Because largely the health service in the US was created by the special conditions in the US, rather than being state-financed, mainly state-financed. It was done through the conquest of the working class in the course of the boom, and the trade unions managed to extract concessions from the employers in healthcare, private healthcare, but quite good if you were a highly paid worker. As far as the poor sections of the working class, in America they've got worse conditions than exist in Western Europe at the present time. That's underlined very graphically and brilliantly by Michael Moore's film Sicko, which is a terrible warning to what will happen to the rest of the world if the American system is actually implemented. And by the way, one of the factors in the worsening of the position in the US is the fact that under the offensive of the employers, pension rights have been sold by the trade union leaders, the health benefits gained by the working class in the past are going to the wall, and that's why in the US there is a clamour from below now for a state-financed national health service. What existed in Britain through the conquest in the NHS and to some extent in other countries in Western Europe. And why that is important is that the catastrophic results in Britain, and especially in London, through the policies of Brown, of neoliberalism, you think that the leaders of the movement would learn a little bit and wouldn't pursue those policies. But what has Brown done? Within days of that result, I saw him on the television at this conference in Northern Ireland with all the billionaires, with the mayor of New York, a super billionaire, Bloomberg, and in effect proposing a massive programme of privatisation of state assets in Northern Ireland, when it's utterly discredited in Britain, when something like 90% of the population want the renationalisation of the National Health Service, of the railways, and are implacably opposed to the programme of introducing the private sector in the NHS itself. And what that teaches us is the following. After the defeat of this character, the leaders of the movement are so wedded to capitalism now, or former leaders of the workers' movement, are so wedded to capitalism, that even when they face an electoral defeat, they don't shift towards the left, they don't re-examine their policies, they go towards the right. In the aftermath of the defeat of the Socialist Party of France, the leader of the French Socialist Party, Ségolène Royal, actually abandoned the formal position of the Socialist Party in France for the 35-hour week. There is no possibility of taking these parties back to become instruments or partial instruments as far as the struggle of working class people are concerned. Now, another point that was raised in the discussion is by the comrade here, the female comrade here, and by a member of the Socialist Workers' Party, which is the general sentiment of many workers today. Why can't we have left unity between the left groups and propose an alternative? Well, the Socialist Party stands for unity. We don't stand for the unity of the graveyard, which means a bloc with some of the right-wing leaders of the movement, but genuine forces that represent real forces. We're in favour of that. And we've attempted to do that in Britain. But one of the complications in creating a new mass formation in Britain is the failed attempts that we've seen in Britain with Arthur Scargill's sectarian attitude towards the Socialist Labour Party created in 1995. And then we organised the Socialist Alliance, and the comrade from the SWP spoke here tonight. The SWP broke up the Socialist Alliance because they wanted to impose on others participating their own particular position, where the majority would rule, which happened to be them at that particular stage, and didn't have the attitude of having, as Kevin indicated in his contribution, an open, broad, democratic party with different trends and ideas in that movement and different organisations. That has now been compounded by the development of respect that we opposed. We opposed it programmatically, and we opposed it in terms of its constitution. And look what happened, by the way, in the battle that has taken place in Britain on the question of winning the ethnic minorities. We opposed the appeal to Muslims as Muslims. We said that openly in discussions with people like George Galloway and people who supported respect. We opposed Ken Livingstone in the campaign in London last week of an organisation of Muslims for Ken. Contrast that, which by the way is appealing to them on a non-class basis. Contrast that with our comrade Dave Nellis, who got a record majority, a record vote in the elections in Coventry, wasn't featured in the national press, who came up against the opposition of the leaders of the mosques, who tried to compel and force Muslims to vote as Muslims for New Labour as it happens. There was a revolt of ordinary working class Muslims in Coventry who said to the imams and the leaders of the mosque, when it comes to religion, we'll listen to you. When it comes to the interests of our families, we're working people first and foremost. This man is a champion of the working class, and we had a class split actually developing, and that's the way to win the different minorities on the socialist, on the Marxist, and on the class struggle policy itself.